"Come early, Mama," my daughter told me over the phone, her voice unusually sweet. "We're going to celebrate with you." But when I arrived at that fancy restaurant in uptown Charlotte, the waiter handed me a laminated card that read "Limited Guest." "That means no dinner, mother-in-law," my daughter-in-law whispered with a cruel smile that sent chills down my spine. My daughter Vanessa just burst out laughing like it was the funniest joke in the world, like humiliating her own mother was entertainment. "My name is Thelma Richards, and I'm 62 years old. All my life I was the perfect mother, the one who always said yes, always forgave, always sacrificed without counting the cost. I raised my children alone after their father passed away from a heart attack when they were teenagers, leaving me with 2 kids, a mountain of debt, and no life insurance. I worked double shifts at the textile mill in West Charlotte, my hands raw from handling fabric for 12 hours straight. I sold homemade sweet potato pies and peach cobblers on weekends at the farmer's market. I cleaned houses at night for wealthy families in Myers Park, scrubbing their toilets and mopping their floors while they slept in their comfortable beds. All of it, every aching muscle and every sleepless night, so that Vanessa and her brother Robert could get a proper education, so they could have what I never had: opportunities and choices and a future that wasn't defined by backbreaking labor. Vanessa was always special in her own way, smart and ambitious, but also cold in a manner that worried me even when she was young. From the time she was a teenager, she had this way of looking at me as if I were an obstacle on her path to something better, as if my presence in her life was an embarrassment she had to overcome. When she married Greg 5 years ago, I thought perhaps motherhood would soften her, that having little Maya would awaken some maternal tenderness in her heart. But Greg was even worse than she was, an arrogant man who worked in finance at one of those big banks in downtown Charlotte, always wearing expensive suits and speaking to me like I was some ignorant countrywoman who couldn't possibly understand the complexities of his important world. "Mama," Vanessa would say every time she visited my small house in the West Side, usually only when she needed something, "You don't understand how the modern world works. Just let Greg handle your paperwork. He knows about these things. He went to business school." Greg would nod with that condescending smirk I had learned to hate, adjusting his designer tie like it was a symbol of his superiority. "Mrs. Richards, you've done enough in your life. You've worked so hard for so many years. Now it's time to rest and let us take care of everything. You can trust us." But I wasn't the helpless old lady they thought I was, not by a long shot. Through all those years of sacrifice, working myself nearly to death to give my children opportunities, I learned something my children never knew and would never suspect: the value of silence, patience, and strategic thinking. While they assumed all I knew how to do was sew, cook, and clean, I was doing something else entirely. I invested every extra dollar I managed to scrape together. When neighborhoods in East Charlotte started showing signs of development in the early 2000s, I bought small properties there, run-down houses that nobody else wanted. I saved money in accounts at different banks, accounts my children didn't know about, accounts I never mentioned. I built a nest egg in complete secrecy because there was something in the way Vanessa and Greg looked at me, something calculating and cold that told me I would need protection one day. That day, I feared, was coming sooner than I'd hoped. Vanessa had a daughter, Maya, my 7-year-old granddaughter, who was the only light in the darkness of my relationship with my daughter. Maya was the only one who treated me with true, uncomplicated love. When I visited their large house in Ballantyne, one of Charlotte's wealthiest suburbs, Maya would run to hug me, her little arms wrapping around my waist, and she would whisper secrets that broke my heart. "Grandma, Mommy says mean things about you when you're not here. She says you're old and useless, and that you smell like poor people." Those words, coming from such an innocent mouth, shattered me every time, but they also prepared me for what I knew was inevitable. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday afternoon in September. Vanessa called me with a voice that was strangely sweet, sweeter than I'd heard in years, which immediately put me on guard. "Mama, we want to invite you to dinner tomorrow night. Something special at that new restaurant downtown. Come early, around 6. We're going to celebrate with you." Greg yelled from somewhere in the background, his voice carrying that false enthusiasm I recognized so well. "Yeah, Mrs. Richards, we're finally going to celebrate the right way. Dress nice." It gave me a fragile hope, foolish as I knew it probably was, to think that maybe after all these years of coldness and disrespect, my daughter and her husband finally appreciated me. Maybe they were planning something beautiful for my upcoming birthday, or perhaps they wanted to apologize for all those years of indifference, for all the times they'd made me feel like a burden instead of the mother who'd sacrificed everything for them. I put on my prettiest dress, a navy blue one with small flowers that I had saved for special occasions, the one I'd bought on sale 3 years ago and had only worn twice. I did my hair carefully, using the curling iron I kept in the bathroom cabinet, and put on a little perfume, the inexpensive kind from the drugstore, but it smelled nice enough. I even put on lipstick, something I rarely did anymore. I took the city bus from my neighborhood to uptown Charlotte, watching the landscape change from modest houses and small businesses to gleaming skyscrapers and luxury hotels. My heart was full of hope, that dangerous emotion I'd tried so hard to suppress over the years. I thought about all the possibilities. Maybe they were planning a surprise party for my birthday next month. Maybe they'd realized how much they'd hurt me and wanted to make amends. Maybe, just maybe, my daughter had finally remembered that I was the one who'd given her life, who'd sacrificed my youth and health so she could have opportunities I'd never had. When I arrived at the restaurant, I understood immediately why Greg had told me to dress nice. It was one of those elegant places I had never been to before, the kind of establishment I'd only seen from the outside while cleaning houses in the wealthy neighborhoods nearby. Crystal chandeliers hung from high ceilings, casting sparkling light across white linen tablecloths. Soft jazz music played from hidden speakers. Well-dressed people sat at intimate tables, speaking in low voices while servers in crisp uniforms moved silently between them. The whole place smelled of expensive perfume and money, that particular scent of privilege I'd become familiar with during my years cleaning wealthy people's homes. I felt out of place immediately, acutely aware of my discount dress and drugstore perfume, but I pushed down my insecurity and walked in with my head held high. I looked around the dimly lit space and saw them at a large table near the window with a view of the Charlotte skyline. Vanessa, Greg, and little Maya, all dressed in expensive clothes that probably cost more than I spent on groceries in 3 months. They were laughing and chatting animatedly, looking like a perfect family in a magazine advertisement. I approached with a smile that felt increasingly forced, but something was off. The energy was wrong. There was something in the air that made my grandmother's intuition scream a warning. The waiter, a young man with slicked back hair and a professional smile, intercepted me before I reached the table. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said with an awkward expression, glancing nervously toward where my family Saturday. "Are you the special guest?" I was confused by the question but answered yes, that I was Vanessa's mother, that they were expecting me. Then he did something that made my blood run cold. He handed me a laminated card on a lanyard, the kind you might wear at a conference. But instead of a name tag, it had 2 words printed in large black letters. "Limited guest." "What does this mean?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, though part of me already knew, already felt the trap closing around me. The waiter glanced again at my daughter's table, clearly uncomfortable with whatever role he'd been assigned in this cruel theater. "It means you can sit at the table, ma'am," he said quietly, avoiding my eyes, "but you can't order any food, only water. I'm very sorry." I felt like I had been physically slapped across the face. The restaurant seemed to tilt around me. My vision blurred with the beginning of tears. I refused to let fall. I looked toward the table and saw Vanessa watching me, her hand covering her mouth as she laughed, her eyes sparkling with malicious glee. Greg had his phone out, pointing it directly at me, recording my humiliation like it was content for social media, like my pain was entertainment to be shared with the world. I wanted to run. Every instinct told me to turn around, walk out of that restaurant with whatever dignity I had left, go home to my small house and never speak to these people again. But something stopped me. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was the need to understand just how cruel my own daughter could be. Maybe it was the look on little Maya's face, confusion and sadness, that made me stay. I walked to the table with that humiliating card hanging around my neck like a badge of shame, feeling the eyes of other diners on me, probably wondering what kind of person wore such a strange thing to an upscale restaurant. "Hello, Mama," Vanessa said with false brightness, her voice dripping with sweetness that made my skin crawl. "So glad you could make it. Did you get your special name tag?" She gestured at the laminated card around my neck and dissolved into giggles. Greg leaned back in his chair, still holding his phone up to record, his expression one of pure amusement. "Mrs. Richards, you look confused. Let me explain. That card means you're here as our guest, but you won't be eating. You know how expensive this place is? We can't afford to feed everyone." He said this while sitting in front of a plate with what looked like a $50 steak. "But Grandma just got here," Maya said in her small voice, looking between her parents with growing distress. "Isn't she hungry? We have so much food." "Hush, Maya," Vanessa snapped at her daughter. "Adults are talking. And your grandmother is fine. She's probably not even hungry. Are you, Mama?" She looked at me with challenge in her eyes, daring me to complain, to make a scene, to give her more ammunition for whatever twisted game she was playing. I sat down in the empty chair, the only one without a place setting, without silverware or a napkin or anything that suggested a meal was expected. I felt like a beggar in the middle of royalty, exactly as they intended. The waiter brought me a glass of water, setting it down with an apologetic expression, and I wrapped my hands around it like it was a lifeline. Vanessa and Greg continued their meal as if nothing unusual was happening, cutting into their expensive steaks while I sat there with only water in front of me, the aroma of grilled meat and garlic butter torturing my empty stomach. But what hurt infinitely more than the hunger was seeing how much they enjoyed my suffering. This wasn't thoughtlessness or neglect. This was calculated cruelty, planned and executed for their entertainment. "Mama," Vanessa said after taking a delicate bite of her steak and dabbing her mouth with a linen napkin, "you're probably wondering why we brought you here like this." Her voice had that particular coldness I knew so well, that tone she used when she wanted to hurt me but maintain a veneer of reasonableness. Greg nodded enthusiastically while chewing, his eyes gleaming with the same cruel amusement I'd seen earlier. "You see, Mama," Vanessa continued, leaning forward like she was about to share a confidence, "Greg and I have been talking a lot about your future. You're 62 years old now. That's getting up there. You're all alone in that old house on the west side, and frankly, we're very worried that you can't take care of yourself anymore." She paused, letting her words sink in, watching my face for a reaction. "We found a very nice nursing home, small and affordable, perfect for someone at your level, someone with your limited means. It's not fancy, but it's clean, and they serve 3 meals a day. You'd have a roommate, of course, but at your age you probably want the company anyway." The world swayed around me. This couldn't be happening. They couldn't be planning what I thought they were planning. Greg put down his fork with theatrical precision and looked at me with that smile I had learned to despise, that expression of false concern that masked something much darker. "Mrs. Richards, let's be realistic here. You've served your purpose in life. You raised your children, you worked hard, and now it's time for you to rest and let the younger generation take over. We'll take care of everything." He pulled a manila folder from the expensive leather briefcase sitting beside his chair and placed it on the table in front of me with a soft thud that felt like a judge's gavel. "We just need you to sign these papers. Nothing complicated, very straightforward." I looked at the documents with growing horror, my hands trembling as I picked up the first page. They were property transfer deeds, powers of attorney, documents that would essentially sign away every asset I owned and turn me into a legal pauper with no control over my own life. My house, the one I'd paid off after 30 years of mortgage payments, my savings accounts, the ones I'd built penny by penny through decades of sacrifice, my small investment properties in East Charlotte that had finally started generating modest rental income, everything would go into Greg and Vanessa's hands, and I would be left with nothing. "It's for your own good, Mama," Vanessa insisted, her voice taking on that patient tone people use when speaking to children or the mentally impaired. "You don't understand investments or taxes or any of that complicated financial stuff. Greg is a finance expert. He went to business school. He knows exactly what to do with everything, how to make it grow, how to protect it. You'd just mess it up if we left it in your hands." Greg nodded enthusiastically, playing his role perfectly in this rehearsed performance. "And don't worry, Mrs. Richards, we're not heartless. We'll give you a monthly allowance so you can have your personal expenses covered. We're thinking $45 a month should be more than enough for you. You know, soap, toothpaste, maybe some magazines to read, that kind of stuff." Vanessa let out a little giggle, covering her mouth with her napkin like a debutante at a society function. "Really, Mama, you won't need more than that. The nursing home will provide your food and a roof over your head and medication management. What else could you possibly need at your age? It's not like you're going out to clubs or buying fancy clothes." She gestured at my discount dress with barely concealed contempt. I felt the anger rising in my chest like boiling lava, hot and dangerous and barely contained. These two monsters, whom I had raised and loved and sacrificed everything for, were sitting here in this expensive restaurant planning to steal everything I had built over decades of back-breaking work. And they were doing it with such calculated cruelty, such casual disregard for my humanity, that it made me physically sick. "And what if I don't want to sign?" I asked, my voice trembling with rage. I was struggling to control, my fingers gripping the edge of the table so hard my knuckles turned white. Vanessa and Greg exchanged a knowing look, a glance that told me they'd anticipated this question and had prepared for it. "Mama," Vanessa said, in a soft but unmistakably threatening voice, "do you really want to do this the hard way? Because we can. We've looked into it. We can have you declared mentally incompetent. It's not that difficult, especially for someone your age living alone." Greg leaned forward, clearly relishing this moment of power. "Mrs. Richards, think about it carefully. A woman your age, 62 years old, living alone in that rundown house in a declining neighborhood. No family visiting regularly. Your memory isn't what it used to be, is it? You forget things sometimes, don't you? Greg has contacts at the hospital, doctors who can evaluate you and certify that you're not of sound mind anymore." He paused, letting the threat hang in the air like poison gas. "It would be very, very easy to convince a judge that you need a guardian, someone to make decisions for you because you're no longer capable. We have documentation already," Vanessa added, pulling out her phone and scrolling through something. "Times you've called me confused about appointments. Times you've repeated the same story twice in one conversation. Times you've seemed disoriented or forgetful. It's all documented, Mama, all time-stamped and recorded." My mind raced. Had I been forgetful lately? Had I repeated myself? I didn't think so. But the seeds of doubt they were planting were insidious. "Think carefully, Mrs. Richards," Greg said, his voice taking on the tone of someone offering generous terms in a negotiation. "You can sign now, voluntarily, and we'll make sure you have a peaceful old age in a clean facility with 3 meals a day. Or you can fight us, and we'll have you declared incompetent, and you'll end up in a state facility, one of those horrible places where they warehouse people nobody wants. Which sounds better to you?" The waiter approached discreetly and placed the bill on the table in a leather folder. Greg made a show of looking at it, his eyebrows raising in mock surprise. "Oh, what a shame, Mrs. Richards. It looks like we brought just enough money to cover our meals. We didn't account for extra expenses." He pointed mockingly at my glass of water, still half full. "But I see you had water. That's $6.25, plus tax and tip. Let's call it $8. You can cover that, can't you?" Vanessa pretended to search through her designer purse, the kind that cost more than I spent on groceries in 2 months. "Oh, Mama, I'm so sorry. I don't have any cash on me. I only brought my card, and we used it all for our meal." "What are we going to do? You don't want to get in trouble with the restaurant, do you? They call the police for people who can't pay their bills." They both looked at me with expressions of false concern, waiting for my complete humiliation. They wanted to see me beg, to watch me plead with them to help me with that measly $8, to witness me reduced to absolute helplessness and degradation. This was their grand plan, to strip me of every shred of dignity before forcing me to sign away everything I owned. But something changed in that moment. Something fundamental shifted inside me. I looked at these two people, my own daughter and her husband, and I saw them clearly for the first time, not as family, not as people who loved me or cared about my welfare, but as predators who'd been circling, waiting for the right moment to strike, to take everything and leave me with nothing. The anger that had been building transformed into something else entirely. Cold clarity, strategic thinking, the survival instinct I'd developed through decades of fighting to provide for ungrateful children. I reached into my purse, that old worn leather bag I'd carried for years, and pulled out a crisp $20 bill. I placed it on the table next to the water glass with deliberate calm. "Keep the change," I said to the waiter who'd been hovering nearby, clearly uncomfortable with the entire situation. Then I looked directly at Vanessa and Greg, meeting their eyes with a steadiness that seemed to surprise them. "I'm not signing anything," I said quietly but firmly. "Not today, not ever. And if you try to have me declared incompetent, you'll find that I'm much sharper than you think." Greg's smile faltered for just a second, before returning with forced brightness. "Mrs. Richards, you're making a mistake. We're trying to help you." "No," I said, standing up from my chair and removing that humiliating laminated card from around my neck. I placed it on the table next to the documents they wanted me to sign. "You're trying to rob me." "There's a difference." Vanessa's face flushed with anger, the mask of false sweetness finally cracking. "How dare you? After everything we've done for you, after we invited you to this nice restaurant." "Invited me to humiliate me," I corrected. "Invited me to mock me in public while you recorded it for your entertainment. Invited me so you could threaten me into signing away everything I've worked for." I looked at Maya, my granddaughter, who was watching this entire exchange with wide, frightened eyes. "Maya, baby, I want you to remember something. Remember that your grandma stood up for herself. Remember that being kind doesn't mean being weak, and that no one, not even family, has the right to treat you like you're worthless." "Don't you dare speak to my daughter," Vanessa hissed, her voice low and venomous. "You have no rights here. You're nothing but a burden we've been carrying for years." "Then consider yourself unburdened," I said, and I walked out of that restaurant with my head held high, leaving them sitting there in shock. I could hear Vanessa calling after me, her voice sharp with fury, but I didn't turn around. I didn't look back. I walked out into the cool September evening in Charlotte, breathing in the fresh air like someone who'd just escaped from drowning. But I wasn't naive enough to think it was over. I'd seen the calculation in their eyes, the determination. They wanted what I had, and they wouldn't stop just because I'd refused them once. So I did what I should have done months ago when I first sensed their intentions. I hired someone to investigate them. Detective James Rodriguez was a private investigator who'd been recommended by a woman at my church, someone who'd used his services during her own difficult divorce. He was expensive, more than I wanted to spend, but I knew I needed professional help. "Mrs. Richards," he said when I met him at his small office near South End, "tell me everything. Start from the beginning." I told him about Vanessa and Greg, about their lifestyle that seemed to exceed their stated income, about the expensive house and cars and vacations they posted about on social media. I told him about the threats, the documents they wanted me to sign, the nursing home they'd picked out for me. I told him my suspicions that something deeper was wrong, that their desperation for my assets suggested they were in some kind of financial trouble they weren't revealing. "Let me look into their finances," Detective Rodriguez said, making notes on a legal pad, "and into their backgrounds. Sometimes people with secrets are very good at hiding them, but everyone leaves traces." 3 weeks later, he called me with news that was both vindicating and terrifying. "Mrs. Richards, you need to sit down for this. Your son-in-law Greg is involved in some very serious financial crimes, money laundering through his bank. He's moving funds for some connected people, organized crime types. He's in deep, and from what I can tell, he's made some mistakes that have put him in danger." My blood ran cold. "Is Vanessa involved?" "Up to her neck," Rodriguez confirmed. "She's been helping him, using her name on accounts, signing documents. She's not an innocent bystander here. They're both culpable." "There's more," Rodriguez continued, his voice growing more serious. "I looked into Vanessa's first marriage, the one before Greg. Her ex-husband died in a car accident 5 years ago, right around the time Vanessa met Greg. The police ruled it an accident, faulty brakes, but I did some digging. The ex-husband had $1 million life insurance policy. Vanessa was the beneficiary. My hands started trembling. "You think they killed him? I think it's worth investigating. The timing is suspicious. The insurance payout gave them seed money for their current lifestyle. And I found a mechanic who remembers Greg asking detailed questions about brake systems around that time. He thought it was odd, but didn't connect it to anything. I felt sick. My daughter wasn't just greedy and cruel. She might be a murderer." "What do I do?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "You go to the police," Rodriguez said firmly. "You tell them everything. You give them this evidence, and you protect yourself, Mrs. Richards, because if they've killed once to get money, they won't hesitate to do it again." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about that little girl, Maya, growing up with parents who were criminals, possibly murderers. I thought about my own safety and what Vanessa and Greg might do if they grew desperate enough. The next morning, I went to the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department and asked to speak with someone in the Financial Crimes Division. I was directed to Detective Sarah Chen, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who listened to my story with increasing interest. "Mrs. Richards, these are serious allegations. Do you have evidence?" I handed her the folder Rodriguez had prepared, full of financial records, photographs, interviews, connections that painted a picture of systematic criminal activity. "We've been looking at your son-in-law's bank for other reasons," Detective Chen admitted. "This fills in some gaps, but we need more to build a case. Would you be willing to help us?" "What would I have to do?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. "Wear a wire. Get them to talk about their plans for your assets. Get them to admit to the pressure they've been putting on you. Maybe even get them to talk about the first husband's death, if you can steer the conversation that way." The thought terrified me. These were people who might have killed before. But I thought about Maya, about what would happen to her if I didn't act. "I'll do it," I said. 2 days later, I called Vanessa and told her I'd changed my mind, that I wanted to meet with her and Greg to discuss the documents they wanted me to sign. I could hear the triumph in her voice when she agreed. "I knew you'd see reason, Mama. You'll see, this is for the best. We'll take care of everything." We arranged to meet at their house in Ballantyne on a Saturday afternoon when Maya would be at a friend's birthday party. Detective Chen fitted me with a wire so small and sophisticated I could barely feel it, hidden in the button of my cardigan sweater. "Just get them talking," she instructed. "Ask questions. Act like you're considering their offer, but you want to understand everything first. And Mrs. Richards, if at any point you feel unsafe, If you think they're becoming violent, you say the code phrase we discussed and we'll come in immediately." I drove to their house with my heart pounding, my hands slick with sweat on the steering wheel. Their home was impressive from the outside, all brick and columns and manicured landscaping, the kind of house that screams success and stability. But I knew now it was all built on crime and possibly murder, a beautiful facade hiding something rotten underneath. Vanessa answered the door with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Mama, come in. Greg's in the study. We have everything ready for you to sign." She led me through the house, past expensive furniture and artwork, into a wood-paneled study where Greg sat behind a large desk like a CEO conducting a business meeting. "Mrs. Richards," he greeted me with false warmth, "so glad you've come to your senses. Please, sit down." I sat in the leather chair across from his desk, my purse on my lap, trying to appear nervous and defeated, which wasn't difficult because part of me genuinely was both of those things. "Before I sign anything," I said carefully, "I need to understand something. Why now? Why are you so urgent about getting control of my assets right now?" I saw Vanessa and Greg exchange a quick glance, a flash of something that might have been panic. "We told you, Mama," Vanessa said, but her voice had a slight edge to it. "We're worried about you. You're getting older, and we want to protect you." "But you have good jobs," I pressed, channeling the instructions Detective Chen had given me. "Greg, you work at that big bank downtown. You must make good money. Why do you need my little bit of savings and my small properties?" Greg's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Mrs. Richards, this isn't about need. It's about smart financial management. Your assets could be working harder for you if they were properly invested." "Is that what you did with Vanessa's first husband's insurance money?" I asked, watching their faces carefully. "Invested it properly?" The room temperature seemed to drop 20 degrees. Vanessa's face went pale, and Greg's friendly expression disappeared completely, replaced by something cold and dangerous. "What are you talking about?" Vanessa asked, her voice tight. "I'm talking about the $1 million life insurance policy from your first husband, the one who died in that convenient car accident right before you met Greg, the one with the faulty brakes." I kept my voice steady, even though my heart was racing so fast I thought they might hear it. Greg stood up slowly from his desk, his hands flat on the surface, leaning toward me in a posture that was clearly meant to intimidate. "Mrs. Richards, I think you've been listening to gossip. That accident was thoroughly investigated. The police cleared it." "Did they know you'd been asking mechanics about brake systems right before it happened?" I asked, amazed at my own courage. "Did they know about the financial trouble he was in, the arguments with Vanessa about money?" "You need to stop talking right now," Vanessa said, her voice shaking with rage. "You don't know what you're saying." "I know you need my money," I said, pressing forward because I was already in too deep to retreat. "I know you're in some kind of trouble, financial trouble. The kind that makes you desperate enough to pressure your own mother into signing over everything she has." "We're not in any trouble," Greg said, but his voice lacked conviction. "We're successful. Look at this house. Look at our cars. All bought with borrowed money and dirty money," I said. "Money from whatever illegal activities you're involved in at that bank. Money laundering, isn't that what they call it?" Greg's face flushed red with anger. He came around the desk in 2 quick strides and grabbed my arm, his fingers digging in painfully. "Listen to me, you old woman. You're going to sign those papers right now, and you're going to forget about all these crazy theories you've got in your head, or things are going to get very bad for you." "Like they got bad for Vanessa's first husband?" I asked, my voice trembling now with real fear. "Is that a threat?" "It's a promise," Vanessa said, and her voice was ice cold, empty of any emotion except calculation. "You think we brought you here just to sign papers? We were hoping you'd cooperate, that you'd make this easy, but if you won't, we have other options." Greg's grip on my arm tightened. "Options that would look like an old woman had an unfortunate accident. A fall down the stairs, perhaps. A heart attack from the stress. These things happen to people your age. especially when they're being difficult and refusing to do what's best for them," Vanessa added, standing up and moving to stand beside Greg, presenting a united front of menace. My mind raced. They were threatening to kill me, saying it out loud, and the wire was recording every word. But I was also alone in a house with two people who might very well follow through on those threats. "Mama," Vanessa said, and her use of that word in this context was chilling, "we've planned this very carefully. We've thought through every possibility. If you sign the papers and go quietly to the nursing home, you'll live out your remaining years in peace. If you don't, well, I'm afraid accidents happen." "Like they happened to your first husband," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Exactly like that," Greg confirmed, apparently past the point of pretending innocence. He wasn't willing to cooperate with our plans either. He thought he could divorce Vanessa and keep his insurance money. He was wrong. "We needed that money," Vanessa said, as if she were explaining a simple business decision. "We had opportunities, investments we wanted to make. He was in the way." "And now I'm in the way?" I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "That's one way to put it," Greg said with a cold smile, "but it doesn't have to be unpleasant, Mrs. Richards. Sign the papers. Make this easy on everyone, especially on yourself." I looked at my daughter, this woman I'd raised, whose diapers I'd changed, whose tears I'd dried, whose dreams I'd sacrificed everything to support. And I saw a stranger, someone capable of murder, someone who'd killed once and was planning to do it again. "What about Maya?" I asked. "What about your daughter? You're going to let her grow up knowing her mother is a murderer?" Vanessa's expression didn't change. "Maya won't know anything, just like she doesn't know anything about her mother's first husband. Children believe what you tell them, and we'll tell her that her beloved grandmother had a tragic accident. She'll cry for a while, and then she'll forget, the way children do. The callousness of it, the casual way she dismissed her own daughter's feelings, made me realize there was no humanity left in Vanessa, if there ever had been any. "You're monsters," I whispered. "We're survivors," Greg corrected. "We do what's necessary to maintain our lifestyle, to get ahead in a world that doesn't reward people who play by the rules." "Is that what you tell yourself?" I asked. "That murder is just survival?" "Call it what you want," Vanessa said with a shrug. "The result is the same. We needed money. We got it. We need your assets now, and we're going to get them, one way or another. The only question is whether you're going to cooperate or whether we're going to have to stage another unfortunate accident." Greg reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a syringe filled with some clear liquid. My blood ran cold. "What is that?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Just a little something to make you more cooperative," Greg said, moving toward me, "or to make your heart stop if you continue to be difficult. It's amazing what you can get if you know the right people in the medical field. Untraceable, looks like natural causes, perfect for an elderly woman with a history of stress and anxiety." This was it, the moment they were going to kill me. I opened my mouth to say the code phrase that would bring the police rushing in, but before I could speak, Vanessa's phone rang. She glanced at it with annoyance. "It's Maya's friend's mother. I have to take this or it'll look suspicious. We don't want anyone wondering why we weren't available." She stepped out of the room, leaving me alone with Greg and his syringe. "This will all be over soon, Mrs. Richards," he said, moving closer. "Just a little stick and then you'll go to sleep. No pain, no suffering. We're not cruel." "You're about to murder me and you say you're not cruel?" I asked, my voice shaking. "I'm being practical," Greg corrected. "If I were cruel, I'd make you suffer. This way is quick and clean." He was reaching for my arm when the door burst open. Not Vanessa returning, but Detective Chen and 4 uniformed officers, guns drawn. "Charlotte Mecklenburg Police. Drop the syringe and put your hands up." Greg froze, the syringe still in his hand, his face a mask of shock and confusion. In the hallway, I could hear Vanessa screaming as other officers detained her. "How?" Greg asked, looking at me with dawning comprehension. "You were wearing a wire. You set us up. I protected myself. I corrected, using his own word. Just like you said, doing what's necessary to survive." Detective Chen moved forward and carefully took the syringe from Greg's hand, bagging it as evidence. "Gregory Morrison, you're under arrest for attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and we'll be adding charges related to the death of Vanessa's first husband once we finish our investigation." 2 officers handcuffed Greg and led him away. I could hear him shouting about lawyers and rights and false accusations. In the hallway, Vanessa was also in handcuffs, her carefully composed facade completely shattered. "Mama, how could you?" she screamed when she saw me. "How could you betray your own daughter? How could you plan to murder your own mother?" I replied, my voice breaking with emotion. "How could you kill your first husband? How could you be willing to leave Maya without a grandmother just so you could steal my money?" "You don't understand," Vanessa said, tears streaming down her face, though I couldn't tell if they were real or performative. "We were desperate. We had debts. Greg's employers, they're not the kind of people you can say no to. So you were going to kill me to pay off your criminal debts?" I asked. "That's your justification?" "We would have taken care of you," Vanessa insisted, even as the officers started leading her toward the door. "The nursing home would have been fine. You would have been safe there. Safe from everyone except you," I said. Detective Chen approached me after they'd taken both Vanessa and Greg away. "Mrs. Richards, you did incredibly well. We got everything on tape. The threats, the confession about the first husband, the attempt with the syringe. Between that and the financial evidence we've been gathering, they're looking at serious prison time." "What about Maya?" I asked, my voice urgent. "What's going to happen to her?" "She's at the birthday party still, unaware of what's happened. We'll need to place her with family." "Is there anyone?" "Her Uncle Robert, my son," I said. "He lives in Raleigh. He's a good man, stable, married with 2 kids of his own. They could take her." "Would you want custody?" Detective Chen asked. I thought about it. At 62, was I prepared to raise a 7-year-old child? But then I thought about Maya, about her innocent face, about how she'd whispered to me about her mother's cruelty. "Yes," I said firmly. "If Robert can't take her, or if the courts think I'm better suited, yes, I want custody. She's my granddaughter, and she deserves better than what her parents gave her." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of legal proceedings, custody hearings, and media attention. The story of the Charlotte grandmother who'd worn a wire to expose her daughter's murder plot became national news. Reporters camped outside my house, asking for interviews. I declined most of them, wanting to protect Maya from as much of this as possible. But I did agree to one interview with a local news station, wanting to tell my story on my own terms. "I want other elderly people to know that they don't have to be victims," I said to the camera. "If your family is threatening you, stealing from you, or trying to take advantage of you, there are resources. There are people who will help. You don't have to suffer in silence." The custody hearing was emotionally draining. Robert, my son, flew in from Raleigh and testified that while he'd be willing to take Maya, he believed I was the better choice. "My mother raised us on her own after our father died," he said from the witness stand. "She worked 3 jobs and still made sure we had everything we needed. She's the strongest person I know. If anyone can help Maya heal from this trauma, it's her." He also revealed something I hadn't known. Vanessa tried to get me to pressure Mama into signing over her assets too. About 6 months ago. She said Mama was getting senile and couldn't handle her own affairs. I told her she was crazy, that Mama was sharper than both of us combined. We had a huge fight about it and haven't spoken since. The judge, a woman in her 50s named Judge Patricia Morrison, listened to all the testimony, reviewed the psychological evaluations, and considered Maya's own wishes. The little girl, in a private session with the judge, had apparently said she wanted to live with me. "My grandma is nice to me," Maya had told the judge according to the court transcript. "She doesn't yell, and she makes good cookies, and she listens when I talk." Judge Morrison awarded me full custody, with Robert as a secondary guardian should anything happen to me. Mrs. Richards has demonstrated remarkable strength, sound judgment, and a clear commitment to this child's welfare, the judge said. "There's no question in my mind that she's the appropriate placement." Bringing Maya home to my small house on the west side of Charlotte was both joyful and heartbreaking. The child was traumatized, confused about why her parents were gone, struggling to understand why the world had turned upside down so suddenly. "Grandma, did Mommy really try to hurt you?" she asked me one night as I was tucking her into the guest room I'd converted into her bedroom, painting it a soft lavender color she'd chosen herself. "Yes, baby," I said, believing that honesty, delivered with love, was better than lies meant to protect. "Your mommy made some very bad choices. She hurt people, and she was planning to hurt me too." "But why?" Maya asked, her eyes filling with tears. "Why would she do that?" "Sometimes people care more about money than they care about the people who love them," I explained, sitting on the edge of her bed. "Your mommy and daddy got mixed up in some bad things, and they forgot what was really important." "Am I going to turn out like them?" Maya asked, and the fear in her voice broke my heart. "No, baby," I said firmly, pulling her into a hug. "You're going to turn out like you. You have a good heart. You're kind and loving, and you care about people. That's who you are, and that's who you'll always be." The trial for Vanessa and Greg began 4 months after their arrest. I attended every day, sitting in the front row, wanting them to see that they hadn't broken me, that I was still standing strong. The prosecution laid out a devastating case, the wire recording where they'd confessed to murdering Vanessa's first husband and threatened to kill me. The financial evidence showing Greg's money laundering operation at the bank, moving hundreds of thousands of dollars for organized crime figures. The forensic evidence from Vanessa's first husband's car showing the brake line had been deliberately cut. Testimony from the mechanic who remembered Greg's suspicious questions about brake systems. Vanessa's lawyer tried to paint her as a victim of Greg's manipulation, a woman who'd been coerced and controlled by an abusive husband. But the prosecution played the wire recording where Vanessa had spoken with cold calculation about killing her mother, where she'd dismissed her own daughter's feelings, where she'd admitted her role in her first husband's murder. The jury didn't buy the abuse defense. Greg's lawyer tried to argue entrapment, claiming I deliberately provoked them into making threats they wouldn't have otherwise made. But Detective Chen testified about the evidence they'd already gathered before I wore the wire, about the pattern of financial crimes and suspicious deaths that suggested this was who Greg and Vanessa really were, not a momentary lapse in judgment. The jury deliberated for 6 hours over 2 days. When they returned, they found both Vanessa and Greg guilty on all counts. Vanessa, guilty of conspiracy to commit murder in the death of her first husband, guilty of attempted murder in my case, guilty of multiple counts of fraud and theft. Greg, guilty of murder in the first degree for actually sabotaging the brake line that killed Vanessa's first husband, guilty of attempted murder, guilty of money laundering, guilty of conspiracy, guilty of fraud. The sentencing hearing was 2 weeks later. I brought Maya with me, against the advice of her therapist, because I wanted her to see that actions have consequences, that justice exists even when it's slow and imperfect. Judge Morrison looked down at Vanessa with an expression of profound disappointment. "Miss Richards, you were given every advantage. A mother who sacrificed everything for you. An education, opportunities, and you chose to use those gifts to prey on others, to murder for money, to plan the death of the woman who gave you life. I find your actions particularly heinous because they were calculated and premeditated, because you targeted your own family, and because you showed no remorse even when confronted with your crimes." She sentenced Vanessa to 18 to 28 years in state prison for her role in her first husband's death and the attempted murder of her mother. Then she turned to Greg. "Mr. Morrison, you are the architect of these crimes. You murdered a man in cold blood for insurance money. You laundered money for organized crime. You attempted to murder an elderly woman, and you corrupted your wife in the process. You are a danger to society, and you will remain so." She sentenced Greg to 28 years in state prison, without possibility of parole. As the officers led them away in chains, Vanessa looked back at me one last time. "Mama," she called out, her voice breaking. "I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Please." I looked at her, this stranger wearing my daughter's face, and I felt nothing but sadness for the person she could have been but chose not to be. "I forgive you," I said quietly, though I wasn't sure if it was true. "But forgiveness doesn't erase consequences. You made your choices, and now you have to live with them." Maya squeezed my hand tightly as we watched her parents being taken away. "Are they going to be okay, Grandma?" she asked. "They're going to be safe," I told her. "They'll have food and shelter and medical care. But they won't be free for a very long time. That's what happens when you hurt people and break the law." Life settled into a new normal after the trial. Maya started therapy twice a week with Dr. Lisa Washington, a child psychologist who specialized in trauma. Slowly, the nightmares became less frequent. The bedwetting stopped. Her smiles became more genuine. She started making friends at her new school, participating in activities, being a child again instead of a traumatized victim. I enrolled her in art classes because I'd noticed she loved to draw. Her teacher said she had real talent, a way of expressing emotions through color and line that was unusual for someone so young. I also started something for myself, something I'd been thinking about since the trial ended. I used some of my savings to establish a nonprofit organization called New Beginnings Charlotte. It was designed to help elderly people who were being financially exploited or abused by family members. We provided legal assistance, counseling, safe housing when necessary, and advocacy. The response was overwhelming. Within the first month, we had 30 cases. Elderly people from across Charlotte and the surrounding areas, people who'd been suffering in silence, too ashamed or too scared to speak up about their own children or grandchildren stealing from them, threatening them, isolating them. Mrs. Richards, one woman told me during an intake interview, tears streaming down her weathered face. "My son has been stealing my Social Security checks for 2 years. He says he's using it to pay my bills, but my electricity keeps getting shut off and I have no food in the house. I was too embarrassed to tell anyone. I thought people would think I was a bad mother, that I raised him wrong." "You're not a bad mother," I told her, holding her hand. "And you're not alone anymore. We're going to help you." We helped her file a police report, got her son investigated and eventually prosecuted, and made sure she had access to her own money again. Story after story came through our doors. A grandfather whose granddaughter had stolen his identity and racked up $50,000 in credit card debt in his name. A widow whose son had forged her signature on a reverse mortgage, essentially stealing her house. An elderly man whose daughter had convinced him to add her name to all his bank accounts and then emptied them, leaving him with nothing. Each case broke my heart, but each case we solved gave me purpose. Maya often came to the office after school, doing her homework at a small desk in the corner while I worked. She watched me help people, saw me fight for those who couldn't fight for themselves, and I could see her learning lessons about strength and justice and standing up for what's right. One afternoon, about a year after the trial, Maya brought me a drawing she'd made. It showed 2 figures, one large and one small, holding hands. Above them was a banner that read, "My Hero." "Is this us?" I asked, my eyes filling with tears. "That's you and me, Grandma," Maya said. "You're my hero because you're brave and you help people, and you saved me from my mom and dad." I hugged her tightly. This beautiful child who'd been through so much but was still capable of love and trust. "You're my hero too, baby," I told her. "You survived something terrible and you're still kind and good. That takes more courage than anything I did." 2 years after Vanessa and Greg were sentenced, I received a letter from the prison. Vanessa wanted to see me. She'd been attending therapy programs, anger management classes, taking responsibility courses. The prison psychologist wrote that she'd shown genuine remorse and was requesting a visit. I sat with that letter for a week, unsure what to do. Part of me wanted to see if she'd really changed, if there was any of my daughter left in the woman who'd tried to kill me. Part of me wanted nothing to do with her ever again. I discussed it with Maya, who was now 9 years old and mature beyond her years. "Do you want to see your mom?" I asked her. Maya thought about it carefully. "No," she finally said. "Not yet. Maybe when I'm older and I understand things better. But if you want to see her, Grandma, you should go. I know you still love her, even after everything she did." She was right. Despite everything, despite the betrayal and the cruelty and the attempted murder, some part of me still loved the little girl Vanessa had been, even though I knew that girl was long gone. I decided to go, not for Vanessa, but for myself, to see if I could find closure, to see if I could truly forgive. The prison was a gray, depressing place, 2 hours outside Charlotte, surrounded by barbed wire and guard towers. I went through security, was searched, and was led to a visiting room with plastic chairs and tables bolted to the floor. And then they brought Vanessa in. She'd changed dramatically. She'd lost weight, her hair was completely gray, though she was only 36, and she wore cheap prison-issue glasses. But the biggest change was in her eyes. The calculating coldness was gone, replaced by something that looked like genuine shame. "Mama," she said when she sat down across from me, her voice cracking with emotion. "Thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you would. I wasn't sure either," I admitted. "But I needed to see you, to see if you've really changed, or if this is just another manipulation." Vanessa nodded, accepting that assessment. "I deserve your skepticism. I've lied to you so many times, hurt you so deeply. I don't expect you to believe me now. But I want you to know that I've spent every day of the last 2 years thinking about what I did, about who I became, about how I could have planned to murder my own mother." "Tell me why," I said. "Not the excuses about debts or pressure. Tell me the real reason." Vanessa took a deep breath, her hands clasped on the table in front of her. "Greed. Pure, simple greed. I wanted the lifestyle I saw other people having. The big house, the expensive cars, the designer clothes, the vacations. And when I couldn't afford it honestly, I was willing to do anything, hurt anyone, to get it, including you. Especially you, because I knew you wouldn't fight back, that you'd forgive me no matter what I did. I was wrong about that last part," she continued, tears starting to fall. "You did fight back. You were stronger than I ever gave you credit for. And you saved my daughter from growing up with a mother who was a monster." "How's Maya?" Vanessa asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Does she hate me?" "She doesn't hate you," I said honestly. "She's confused and hurt, and she's in therapy working through the trauma. But hate? No. She's too young to carry that kind of burden. I won't let her." "Is she happy?" Vanessa asked, and for the first time, I saw genuine maternal concern in her eyes. "She's getting there. She has friends. She's doing well in school. She loves her art classes. She's safe and loved, and she knows she matters. That's more than you gave her." Vanessa flinched at that truth but didn't argue. "Will you tell her that I love her? That everything I did wrong was my failure, not hers? That she should grow up to be nothing like me?" "I'll tell her," I promised. "But Vanessa, love isn't just words. Love is action. Love is sacrifice. Love is putting someone else's needs above your own. You didn't love me or Maya when you were planning to kill me. You loved money and status and yourself." "I know," Vanessa said, her voice breaking. "And I have to live with that knowledge every single day. But Mama, I want you to know that if I could go back, if I could undo everything, I would. I'd choose you over money. I'd choose being a real mother to Maya over all the designer clothes and fancy restaurants in the world. But you can't go back," I said. "None of us can. We can only move forward and try to do better." We talked for another hour, and slowly, I began to believe that maybe, just maybe, prison had cracked through the shell of greed and selfishness that had consumed her. She told me about the programs she'd completed, the therapy she was doing, the way she was helping other inmates learn to read. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," Vanessa said as our time was ending. "I don't deserve it. I'm just asking you to know that I'm truly sorry, that I understand what I did was unforgivable, and that I hope someday, when Maya's older, she might be willing to hear from me. Not to have a relationship necessarily, but just so I can tell her I'm sorry for being such a terrible mother." I stood to leave, feeling a complex mix of emotions: sadness for what could have been, relief that Maya was safe, a tentative, fragile hope that maybe Vanessa really was changing. "I'll think about bringing Maya to see you someday," I said, "but that's her decision to make when she's ready, not mine to force. In the meantime, you keep working on yourself. Become the person you should have been all along." As I drove back to Charlotte, I thought about everything that had happened over the past 2 years. The humiliation at the restaurant that had started all of this. The terror of wearing a wire and confronting my daughter and son-in-law. The satisfaction of seeing justice served. The joy of watching Maya heal and blossom. And now, this strange, complicated visit with Vanessa that left me feeling both drained and oddly hopeful. When I got home, Maya was at the kitchen table working on a drawing. "How was it?" she asked, looking up from her artwork. "It was hard," I admitted. "But I think your mother is trying to become a better person." "Good," Maya said simply, then returned to her drawing. She'd drawn a tree with deep roots and strong branches, and on each branch was a word: strength, love, justice, courage, family. "That's beautiful, baby," I told her. "What's it called?" "It's called Grandma's tree," she said. "Because you're like a tree. You have strong roots from all the hard work you did when you were young. And you have branches that protect people, like me and all the people at New Beginnings. And even though storms came, like what Mom and Greg did, you didn't fall down. You stayed strong." I felt tears streaming down my face as I hugged her. This child, this beautiful, insightful child, understood things that many adults never grasped. That strength isn't about never being hurt, it's about standing back up when you are. That family isn't always blood, it's the people who choose to love and protect you. That justice matters, but so does mercy, and knowing the difference between them is wisdom. Today, 5 years after that terrible dinner at the restaurant, I'm 67 years old. Maya is 12, thriving in middle school, still drawing her beautiful artwork, thinking about becoming a lawyer someday so she can help people like I do. New Beginning Charlotte has expanded to 3 locations and has helped over 500 elderly people escape from financial abuse and exploitation. We've recovered millions of dollars stolen from vulnerable seniors. We've sent multiple perpetrators to prison. We've given people back their dignity and their independence. And me? I'm still here, still fighting, still standing strong. The house I bought with decades of hard work is still mine. The savings I accumulated through sacrifice are still intact. The properties I invested in have appreciated, providing a steady income stream. But more than any of that, I have Maya. I have purpose. I have the satisfaction of knowing that when evil came for me, when my own daughter tried to destroy me, I didn't just survive, I fought back and won. My story isn't just about revenge or justice, though those played their parts. It's about refusing to be a victim. It's about standing up for yourself, even when the people hurting you are the ones you love most. It's about understanding that being kind doesn't mean being weak, and that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is say no and mean it. To anyone listening who's in a similar situation, who's being exploited or abused or threatened by family members, I want you to hear this. You are not alone. You are not helpless. You have value that doesn't diminish with age. You have rights that don't disappear because you're elderly. You have resources and people who will fight for you if you'll just ask for help. Don't suffer in silence. Don't sign away your assets out of fear or guilt. Don't let anyone, not even your own children, treat you as less than you are. That is Thelma Richards' story. Now I want to hear from you. Where are you watching this from? What city? What country? Drop it in the comments below. I love seeing our global community come together over these powerful stories about family betrayal, elder abuse, and the moment when a mother has to fight for her life against her own daughter. Real question. If you were Thelma, what would you have done when they handed you that limited guest card at the restaurant? Would you have walked out immediately? Would you have stayed and confronted them? Or would you have done exactly what Thelma did and gathered evidence? Tell me in the comments. Hit that like button if this story made you feel something. Share it if you know someone who's being financially exploited by their own family members. Someone whose children see them as a bank account instead of a person. Someone who needs to know that being elderly doesn't mean being helpless. And subscribe for more raw, real stories about grandmothers who refuse to be victims, daughters who betray the mothers who sacrificed everything for them, murder plots exposed by brave survivors, and what happens when you stand up for yourself even when your own family wants to destroy you. This story is about more than revenge. It's about dignity. It's about refusing to let anyone, not even your own children, treat you like you're disposable just because you're getting older. It's about understanding that your value doesn't diminish with age, that your rights don't disappear because you're a senior citizen, and that you deserve respect no matter how old you are. Thanks for watching. Remember, elder abuse is real, and it's more common than most people think. Financial exploitation by family members is one of the fastest-growing crimes in America. If you or someone you know is being pressured to sign over assets, being threatened, being isolated or controlled by family members, there is help available. Organizations like New Beginnings exist in many cities. Adult Protective Services can investigate. You don't have to suffer in silence. And to the Thelmas out there, the strong grandmothers who worked their whole lives and built something for themselves, don't let anyone take what's yours. Don't sign papers you don't understand. Don't let guilt or fear make you give up your independence. You earned what you have. You deserve to keep it. And you deserve to be treated with respect and love, not as a target for exploitation. Be strong. Be brave. Stand your ground. Because sometimes the people who are supposed to love you most are the ones you need to protect yourself from. See you in the next video.